Now that we understand how water pollution affects aquatic ecosystems, let's move on to one of the most important concepts in this chapter, eutrophication. The key definition you need to remember is, eutrophication is the enrichment of water with excess nutrients, especially nitrates and phosphates, which leads to the rapid growth of algae, followed by oxygen depletion that can kill aquatic organisms. As you can see in the diagram, the thick green layer covering the surface of the water is an algal bloom, which is the most obvious sign of eutrophication. This happens when a lake, river, or pond receives excessive amounts of nutrients, mainly nitrates and phosphates, usually from agricultural fertilizers and untreated sewage. These extra nutrients create ideal conditions for algae to grow rapidly. So, let's understand how eutrophication occurs step by step. The first stage is increased nutrient availability. Eutrophication begins when fertilizers from farmland or untreated sewage enter rivers and lakes through runoff. These introduce large amounts of nitrates and phosphates into the water, increasing the concentration of mineral ions and making the environment highly favorable for plant growth. The second stage is the rapid growth of producers. Because nutrients are now abundant, algae and other producers reproduce very quickly, forming a dense algal bloom across the water's surface. This thick layer blocks sunlight from reaching the aquatic plants growing below, reducing their ability to carry out photosynthesis. The third stage is the death of producers. As sunlight becomes limited, many submerged aquatic plants die. After some time, the algae themselves also die because the nutrients become depleted. The dead plants and algae sink to the bottom of the water, causing a large accumulation of organic matter. The fourth stage involves increased decomposition and aerobic respiration. Decomposer bacteria feed on the dead organic material and multiply rapidly. As they break down the dead plants and algae, they respire aerobically, consuming large amounts of dissolved oxygen from the water. The fifth stage is the reduction in dissolved oxygen. Because decomposers are using oxygen at a very high rate, the concentration of dissolved oxygen falls dramatically, particularly in the deeper parts of the water body. This condition is known as oxygen depletion or hypoxia. Finally, we reach the last stage, which is the death of aquatic organisms. Fish and other aquatic animals depend on dissolved oxygen for respiration. When oxygen levels become too low, they suffocate and die. As more organisms die, decomposition increases even further, causing oxygen levels to drop even more. This creates a vicious cycle that can eventually lead to the collapse of the entire aquatic ecosystem. Now, if we look at this next diagram, it summarizes the same process in a clear sequence. First, nutrient-rich runoff containing fertilizers and sewage enters the water, causing nutrient enrichment. These nutrients trigger a rapid algal bloom, which spreads across the water surface. The dense layer of algae blocks sunlight, preventing underwater plants from photosynthesizing, so they die. The dead plants and algae then sink to the bottom, where decomposer bacteria feed on them. As bacterial populations increase, they carry out aerobic respiration and consume large amounts of dissolved oxygen. Eventually, oxygen levels become extremely low or may even reach zero in some areas. Fish and other aquatic organisms can no longer survive, leading to widespread deaths and a major loss of biodiversity. The next diagram illustrates the same concept from another perspective. Excess nitrates and phosphates from agricultural runoff and sewage stimulate the explosive growth of microscopic plants and algae. Since there are not enough primary consumers to feed on this enormous algal population, much of it eventually dies and sinks. Decomposer bacteria then break down this organic matter, using up the dissolved oxygen through respiration. As oxygen becomes depleted, fish and many other aquatic organisms suffocate and die, leaving behind a severely damaged ecosystem.